Hey, good morning, Philadelphia. Welcome to another Ask the Experts. We're with you every Tuesday from 10 to 11. We bring on Philadelphia's finest experts in the area of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. And this is going on our 7th year now. Amazing. We're also in other cities, but our first show every week at 10 o'clock is now my favorite, and she's got the clock behind her, which means she is in town. Let me welcome you to attorney Angela Giampolo. Good morning, Angela.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
And this is just kind of an inside thing. I just got something, and thank you. I got that. Well, I got to ask you something. And Angela and I rarely get into politics at all, but I thought about you this week, and Senator Cruz made a big enough statement. It's been running everywhere, and I want to get your thoughts on it. It was about the, I guess, marriage equality, and it's in 2015 that he said it should have never been allowed. Did you see that?
I mean, he said it back in 2015 and so he's not saying anything that he and probably a lot of other people, his comrades, don't already think. But yeah, I mean, now post Roe, now is the time for politicians to sort of reiterate, right, and vocalize what their stance would be if there was a vote. Because one of the things that the president can do and or the Senate is a marriage equality act, right? So New Jersey, right, for instance, I'm licensed in PA and in New Jersey. My main office is in the neighborhood in Philadelphia, but we have an office in New Jersey. And about 9 or 10 months ago, now New Jersey codified marriage equality, right? And so meaning it is law that LGBTQ folks can marry in New Jersey. So it would require a vote of the entire House and 2/3 Senate, right, to undo that. Very, very hard, much harder than overturning a case. So, and like with Roe in Pennsylvania and sort of all over the news, you're hearing states calling on legislatures to codify abortion, right? Like put it in law in the state that abortion is a right. So now you have the federal government talking about a marriage equality act, knowing that if the question goes up to the Supreme Court, that it will likely be overturned. So trying to sort of get ahead of that happening, they're calling on legislatures to bring forth a marriage equality act, sort of the antithesis of DOMA, the Defense Against Marriage Act, right? So now you have politicians like the Ted Cruz's of the world that are vocalizing now, like, guess what? In 2015, I thought it was wrongly decided, and I think it's wrongly decided now. And if it were to come up for a vote, right, I would vote against it. So, it feels out of left field because Roe v. Wade was about abortion and not about LGBTQ rights. But we all know that what it kicked up was, oh, wow, if Roe v. Wade could be overturned and a question like abortion left to the states, then without fail, marriage equality could be overturned, and whether or not LGBT folks can get married will be left to the states. So you have politicians talking about it now like they were in 2015.
Is that good or bad?
It means that everybody who's worried about what's going to happen if it goes up to the Supreme Court is rightfully so worried, right? Because you have a lot of people coming to me. So it's bad because, so to answer your question, is it good or bad? It is bad because it means that we are truly next on the chopping block. So any LGBTQ folks out there who, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, didn't get worried, still don't think, oh, that doesn't apply to me, that's abortion. How could it apply to my marriage? Or how could it apply to LGBTQ folks? This is proof that the Ted Cruz's, the Rick Santorums, like all the anti-LGBTQ folks are now talking about it again because it's political discourse. Like the way that I've just been describing it to clients is your house is not on fire, but the house 3 doors down from you on your block is on fire. And if the house 3 doors down from you is on fire, wouldn't you be like, hey, babe, let's get our things together. Like, let's prepare. Like the house 3 doors down's on fire. Pack up. What are you doing?
Analogy.
You know what I mean? So your house is not on fire, but getting your estate planning in order, any confirmatory adoptions in order, transgender name changes or gender marker changes in order, that's you preparing your home to getting it in order because the house 3 doors down's on fire. And so the fact that Ted Cruz is talking about that is proof that the house 3 doors down is on fire and it's coming this way and the roofs are made of straw. Another analogy.
Angela, I don't even want to go near abortion, but marriage equality, why? I don't understand. I mean, I guess I was closed-minded at one time, but you learn, I mean, I kind of feel bad that I was.
Well, I mean,
equality should be. I mean, it's so important. Why are people still now here in 2022 still so close-minded?
Well, Steve, so I feel like if I could change your mind on marriage equality, then one day I'm going to change your mind on abortion because you keep saying we're not going to talk about it because clearly, we have diverging opinions. We haven't talked about it yet, but maybe we'll save a whole show just for open dialogue where no one is angry and we just, speak openly because I feel like nobody does. And if anything, this show is a safe place for that. And so to have us just have a whole show where I'll come up with questions where we actually talk about it.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah. And I think that would be really good for
both the whole thing about your show, Angela, is you want to educate people. And I always felt like, gosh, if we could just touch one person each week, wow, that would be amazing.
And next week it's going to be you.
Okay. Hey, you already changed me already.
Right. But to your point about marriage equality, and you saying like it doesn't make sense to you and you feel bad and it's, to me, what is most confusing is Justice Clarence Thomas, right? So you had Loving v. Virginia. So for ever, right, we had interracial marriages being illegal and people couldn't marry. And so now you have a Supreme Court justice, Black man married to a white woman, who is ultimately on like one of the leaders, right, of overturning marriage equality and making contraception, right, illegal. So Justice Clarence Thomas. To me, when you say it doesn't make sense, to me, that is what makes the least amount of sense, because what he would be overturning, and in his concurring opinion, what he calls to overturn inherently overturns his right to be married to Ginny, his white wife, right? It's based on the same progeny of cases. So it literally doesn't make sense, at least coming from him. And it was his concurring opinion that sort of led the charge, right? We don't know as explicitly where the other Supreme Court justices land, as explicitly as Justice Clarence Thomas. So that's what makes the least amount of sense to me. But, and ultimately, what they said is that the right to privacy is not inherent in the Constitution. And they're not wrong in the sense that it's not written into the Constitution. The word privacy does not make an appearance in the Constitution. And they're textualists, they're originalists, they go by what's in the text of the Constitution, and it's not written. Nowhere will you find the word privacy in the Constitution. So they're right there. But then it depends on whether or not you're a textualist, which means that the text was written, whether it's 300 years ago, 700 years ago, that whatever the text is, that governs however many years later. And there are other jurisprudential scholars and Supreme Court justices who believe that you know, it's a living, breathing document. And yes, at one point, founding fathers had to write the text because someone had to write it. Someone had to put pen to paper, but that they didn't mean for that pen to paper to be literal moving forward, that 350 years ago, the humans reading it, you know, cannot read into it anything, that there's nothing inherent in the text of the Constitution. So starting with Griswold case and sort of the progeny moving forward, the inherent right to privacy was read into the Constitution. Okay. And that's what they're saying is not there. And so any right that has come since then, Griswold was contraception, right? You had Loving v. Virginia, the right to privacy in your own home, decriminalizing of gay sex, sodomy. In 2003, Lawrence v. Texas, you know, we couldn't even talk about marriage equality until it was legal for us to even have sex, which was only in 2003. 9/11 was 2001. It was still illegal in the whole country for gay men to have sex, let alone get married in 2003. So then that was overturned. And then we have, you know, Windsor case and then Obergefell and then Bostock, which is sort of different in employment. But I don't think that answers your question around it not making sense. I guess when anyone says this doesn't, when anyone says it doesn't make sense, I go right to Clarence Thomas and him being a black man married to a white woman, how nothing about that makes sense.
I just wish you were more passionate about this. Anyway, today we had planned, and we are talking about employment law as it pertains to the LGBTQ community, because Attorney Angela Giampolo she really specializes and works with the LGBTQ community. And we get into family law, estate planning, real estate law, business law, because they all kind of really coincide with each other. But today we are talking about employment law. I have got tons and tons of questions for you. When I heard Ted Cruz, I've got to ask Angela about this. And it should be open, not just her and I, but to our listeners. So I want to start off with, is sexual orientation a protected category or not?
Yeah, so it is now. So the last progeny of cases from the Supreme Court gave us Bostock, which amended Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and said that sexual orientation, gender identity is a protected class. And so now you can, regardless of the laws of your state, so Pennsylvania, we still do not have employment discrimination protection at a state level, LGBTQ folks. Like, that is not a law that Pennsylvania has passed. New Jersey has had it for quite some years, over a decade. And so the state in which you live in may or may not have employment discrimination protection. However, now due to Bostock, you have it at a federal level through Title VII. So it's a protected class. There are limitations to the protections there, but yes, given, and that was in 2000 June, so going literally 2 years almost to the day since that Supreme Court case came down.
Who does the anti-discrimination laws apply to? I know that you've got to have something like more than 15 employees to follow the federal employment laws.
Right. So, before the commercial, we talked about Bostock and the Supreme Court case that provided federal protections under Title VII, and I said there are limitations to Title VII. And so there may not be protections in the state in which you live, and in which case, like here in Pennsylvania, for instance. So then the limitations could hurt you because millions of Americans work for a small company, right? Like, including employees of mine, right? Like, obviously not that I would discriminate against anyone due to their sexual orientation or gender identity, but unless, it's Nico or I, right? Like, so we're a company under 15 people. And so if I did discriminate against an employee, then Title VII would not be applicable, and then the employee would be in Pennsylvania, and ultimately not have any recourse. So Title VII applies to entities or companies in excess of 15 employees, which can be very limiting with the millions and millions of small businesses that we have in this country.
Well, does a person have to be an employee to be protected by discrimination? I mean, what about candidates?
Candidates interview candidates, and also potentially 1099 independent contractors, per diem contractors, depending on the scenario, but also interview candidates for sure. There are companies who hire. I have worked with companies even on how to make their interview process more inclusive, and I mean, there can be a situation that can happen in an interview. There can be discrimination in the actual interview, or there can be discriminatory practices in how people interview. Abercrombie and Fitch is a great example of that in terms of a case that went all the way up to the Supreme Court, with both how they interviewed and the types of people, the only people that they hired, and their interview process. So yeah, you don't just have to be an employee, a W-2 employee.
God, I would think that a company, especially a larger company, would want to consult with you on what they can't do or say. Do you ever get companies that just come to you for consultation?
Yeah, either consultation, or what's been happening a lot lately, especially since we just came off of Pride Month, is to talk to their company, their employee resource group, and or their company about LGBTQ rights. So Waymo is a subsidiary of Google, and I spoke to them during Pride Month. That is their subsidiary that's working solely on an autonomous driving car. There's also a subsidiary of Philips called Signify, and I spoke to their Pride group. I'm in talks with other corporations to speak to their Pride groups in Q3, even though Pride Month is over. So yeah, there are a lot of large corporations, Fortune 500 companies, that are approaching me just to speak to them, and then also to hire me to consult on either their employee handbooks, their guidelines, their policies. HRC, Human Rights Campaign, reviews the corporate policies of the Fortune 500 and other companies, and then grades them for what's called the Corporate Equality Index. And I've been hired by both municipalities and corporations to help them increase their score with the HRC and their Corporate Equality Index, and municipalities with their Municipality Equality Index.
This is really getting off the subject, but I trust you so much, and I trust your opinion so much. I believe this past weekend in Philadelphia, there was a parade, and it was a Sesame Street parade. And two Black children went up to, now this is a parade, parades move. Two Black children went up to one of the characters to try to get their picture taken with them, and the character kind of waved them off. Now they're going to be sued for, and of course, the attorney who is involved in this is known for cases like this. But is there a case there for any kind of discrimination?
Probably not. I mean, especially if it was a parade that, again, I don't know who put on the parade, if there were Sesame characters, like what organization put on the parade. But I mean, let me back up. Can they be sued? It sounds like they already have been. So yes. Unfortunately, in this country, I always say, being sued is not like an elective surgery. Like, you can choose to get your nose done. But when you get sued, you don't have a choice but to defend it. So right. And we're very litigious in this country, and I say that being Canadian. that type of lawsuit would not be lodged in the first place in most other countries. So can they be sued? Yes, they can. They have been. Apparently this lawyer, I'll look it up, files these types of cases, probably to get their name in the paper, just
right.
Notoriety and whatnot. So now, will it go anywhere? No. I mean, my first thought is, some sort of sovereignty exemption, right? So it was a parade, they're on public streets, even safety exemption, like maybe they waved the kids off, they were moving, the parade was moving.
Right.
I mean, right. Just, I haven't heard of this. And right off the bat, my brain is coming up with a bunch of defenses against the lawsuit that it would have nothing to do with discrimination. So I don't see it going anywhere, but I will Google it after we get off and look into it further. And if I have more thoughts, I'll touch on it next week. But
okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's what sucks about this country ultimately.
Yeah, I hear you. When you get calls, when it's about employment law, what would you say is the number one complaint that you get calls on as it pertains to employment law?
Definitely transgender folks calling around just discrimination in the workplace. Like without fail, if I had to take 10 calls, I'd say 7 of them are from trans folks, gender, non-binary folks in some way being discriminated against, misgendered. A lot over the weekend. I'll get a lot of emails on Sundays or Mondays about occurrences that occurred on a Friday or Saturday night with bouncers mistreating trans folks, misgendering them, maybe harassing them more, following them into bathrooms that otherwise wouldn't occur to a cis person in the same establishment. A lot of repeat establishments, I won't name them, but a lot of establishments that are local to the area where it's a lot of complaints around the same types of, or the same establishment and or same types of establishment, bars, restaurants, Friday night, Saturday night, bouncers. But I would say, that's not the type of issue that's like a demographic or a community, but I would say definitely the trans community, number one. And then as far as issue, it could be both employment, but also a lot of nightlife, being mistreated out and about when people are trying to enjoy themselves and patroning establishments.
Well, we only have a few minutes left. I wanted to ask you, what is at-will employment situation?
Yeah, so that's kind of an easy question to wrap up. So Pennsylvania is an at-will state. I don't know about Florida, but it's an at-will state where you're not guaranteed an employment agreement, which means if you're an at-will employee, the boss can come in and say, I'm firing you because you're gay. Let's say, like if you're, because I hate that yellow shirt or because you smell, it could be any reason. They can come in and you're an at-will employee and they can terminate you at will.
Wow.
And so if nothing else, if you're faced with an at-will employment choice, to the extent that you can advocate for yourself to have an employment agreement, do so. Okay, that's my biggest piece of advice, and we'll end on that if you have the ability to advocate for an employment agreement, that right there binds you, and rises your level of protection even more.
Wow. This show just goes by so fast, but Angela will be with us again next Tuesday at 10 o'clock, attorney Angela Giampolo, and we talk about LGBTQ law, community law, and thank you so much. You know how much I respect your opinion, and I learn something new every week, and that's what we're hoping our listeners will get. Angela, give everybody your phone number and how they can reach you.
Absolutely. So feel free to give me a call, 215-645-2415, and you can reach me at my website, giampololaw.com, and I blog at billygaylawyer.com.
Wonderful. Angela will be back with us next week. Angela, have a wonderful week.
Be sure to tune in every Tuesday at 10 o'clock a.m. when Angela Giampolo is the guest on Ask the Experts on 860 WWDB AM and online at WWDBAM.com.